So the next part of our program, we have our presenters, and if there's a question or a big idea or thought that came to you, and you still haven't had a chance to express that or speak directly to one of our presenters, now is the time to do it. And I will hand it over to Britt to begin the Q&A.
Thank you so much, Sarah. Okay, so we have about 30 minutes now to get all of those questions out that you guys did not have time to ask in the sessions. And I think the facilitators were just as sort of stressed out by the fact that they had to try to cram so much good information and knowledge and expertise into 25 minutes. So they know that there were things that they weren't able to cover. So if there's anything that you guys would like to ask now, now's the time. You have a couple extra minutes. Oh, Louisa, go ahead. I was going to kick us off, but no, only if there were no questions.
So Danielle, I had a question about crowdfunding.
Sure.
We talked about it briefly, but is there a certain demographic that crowdfunding is working really well with? I know that I saw some information about millennials really like to give together, or they like to do activities together. And so I just wanted to get a sense of, is there any information demographically around crowdfunding?
Sure. So it is true millennials do like to give together, and millennials like to give. They really are the generation of caring and giving. Other than that, for crowdfunding, it's who's your crowd that you're trying to fund through. And if you're targeting properly, the demographic depends on the topic and who you're trying to raise money with. And people are going to support your cause if they believe in your cause. So I wouldn't necessarily be concerned about age demos, and more that you're targeting the right people that care about the same things that you care about and are going to want to support your mission.
Can you guys hear me without the mic? Okay, I'll leave the mic with you then. So can I ask a follow-up to that?
Absolutely.
So I know a lot of organizations that, like on the day of giving, the Super Tuesdays, things like that, they wanted to do crowdfunding, and they want to put a campaign out on one of the many crowdfunding platforms, and so they did that, and then the money didn't come rolling in. And so I've heard that there is a certain amount of sort of development that needs to happen before you even launch your crowdfunding campaign. Could you just talk a little bit about that?
Absolutely. We talked a little bit earlier that a lot of the difficulties that the nonprofits have is that they don't get out in the space and start talking socially to people until they need them. So you want to cultivate your online audience long before you need them. 90 days prior to needing them is generally the formula that I like to use. So if you have an event, you want to get 90 days ahead of that, where you start talking about the event, and we're doing the 80-20 rule, where that is 80% of what you're sharing on social media are things that your audience are going to care about, things that you can be social about, things that you can talk about, and then 20% of that time is the ask, whether the ask is money or whether the ask is join my organization or support my cause. Most of the conversation is going to happen in the social space. It's going to be about things that they care about, and you want to show them that you care about them, and then it's the ask. So for the crowdfunding, I think many of you know that we talked about in one of the sessions, if you want to raise $10,000 in crowdfunding, the ask may be $5,000 because you don't want to overextend yourself. If you don't hit your mark, the money goes back to the people. So you want to come in under what you think you might want. You can still go to $10,000. You can continue to ask, but you want to make sure that you hit the mark so that you can keep going. And that you're in that space and you're talking to people. We talked about storytelling. I can't emphasize it enough. Why would I give the money to your campaign? Pull on my heartstrings. Make me feel it. Make me want to give you my money. Make me cry. Make me emotional. You get that emotive thing out of me where I want to go into my pocket, out of my pocket. And again, it's the 80-20 rule. So you're not going to ask me every single day, 30 days prior to, but you would run a campaign where you might start ramping it up once you get to the campaign. And there are different marketing tactics we can talk about. I don't want to take up all the time, but there are different marketing tactics that we talk about as you get closer to the fundraising, and how you change your speech and your talk as you get to the push button where we want your money. But again, you want to be out there far enough in advance so that you can build a community that cares about what you're raising money for.
Any other questions? Any other questions, other topics? Okay, well, then I have another follow-up. So, Ron, I heard that in your session, you talked about moving to individuals as donors. So while we're talking about the crowd, could you add any other insights that maybe you didn't get a chance to cover in your session? Or maybe, how would an organization go about making that switch if they're largely funded through, government grants or corporate donors, and now they want to try to engage the crowd? How do they think about kind of taking on a strategy like that?
Sure. Well, one of the things, and I'll emphasize this for those of you who weren't in one of my 2 sessions, about 80 to 85 cents of every dollar that comes into a charity comes from an individual, alive or dead. I'm not trying to be negative there, but that is an actual fact. So if you're getting most of your funding from corporations, if you're getting most of your funding from foundations, that's wonderful. But as I've told a number of charities before, that's probably the perfect time, whether it's through crowdfunding, whether it's through online donations, whether it's through direct mail, whatever the case may be, that you want to reach out to individual donors, that's the time to do it. Because if you're already getting most of your funding, and there are a lot of studies that have shown corporate funding, especially corporate funding, continues to go down, or corporations like to give in-kind gifts. Those are great for some charities, they're not good for others, who obviously we know cash is king, kind of when it comes to gifts and unrestricted gifts are king. That's what we like to get. So if you are one of, and there were several in the groups I had that focused, they got almost all of their funding from foundations and corporations. That to me is a perfect time. And there are a lot of different ways to reach individuals. And again, crowdfunding is a great new way to do it. I still know a lot of the big charities that raise a lot of money from snail mail, okay, and getting that out. Whatever the case may be, if you're doing it through social media, there's a number of ways to do it. But this is a perfect time, especially if that's where your funding sources are coming from, corporations, foundations, other sources. Go ahead and get an individual giving program. Because here, and I'll just give you one last, and I don't want to take too much time either, but I was with a charity that got about 80% of our funding from foundation grants. And that was great for about 10, 15 years in their existence. Well, the leadership changed at a couple of those foundations, and guess what those foundations started doing? Their mission changed. Who they wanted to support changed. So guess what happened to our funding? It got cut by 20-25% in a very short period of time. So we had to scramble to try and get, generally speaking, unless you do something, I'm not trying to be blunt, really stupid, you rarely lose 20-25% of individual donors in any short period of time. You can lose a foundation grant or corporate gifts completely. And that's a big part of your budget that can have a huge impact. So something to keep in mind.
Yeah, that's a great point, because I think a lot of organizations go after the big fish donors and say, okay, if I could just win this one, that's 25% of my budget. But then that's a lot of risk, because if that one donor walks, there goes 25% of your budget. So it's a great point. Can you just finish up?
To your point about individual donors, can you walk through some prospecting strategies if you're not working with an institution that has a large alumni base or a faith-based institution where people may be committed to giving to that institution already? So how do you prospect individuals that may be interested in your cause without those strong ties already?
A lot of different ways to do that, and I think, in fact, to be quite honest with you, I think some of the ways with my friend here in social media are great ways to start getting followers, getting people interested in your cause. Start telling your story to individuals. Then you can transition into, in the old days you did that maybe by huge direct mail campaigns or advertising campaigns that are incredibly expensive, okay, especially for charities now. Using something like social media to get followers, I think is a great way to do that, and then start getting them into maybe the more what I would call traditional ways of fundraising. Okay, and that may be direct mail, maybe e-newsletters for education purposes, those kinds of things. Start them off like that, I think, is a great way to get started if you don't have many constituents. If you're also looking, because there are also individual donors, for, let's say, major gift donors, I think you start with the board in that way. That's a great way to start getting doors opened up for you. Okay, maybe you've never done anything with major gifts before. I think that's a great way. Let's say you have a small base of donors, okay, that have been giving you, let's say, $100 for the last 5 years, 10 years, whatever, that can also be a great source for major donors as well. So when I say individual donors are 80-85%, those are planned gifts, those are major gifts, those are annual fund, there are all kinds of gifts like that. Okay, does that answer your question? Good.
I just want to add one thing too. All of you in the room, I'm sure, do donations and have nonprofits that you support. And we talked about in the workshop, what moves the needle for you? What emails do you open up that make you want to donate? What phone calls do you respond to when you're cold called? What campaigns are on social media or on the web that inspire you? The same things that are going to inspire you are going to inspire the individuals that he just spoke about. But that's what's going to move the needle. I talked about the fact that I love the studio theater. If they call me one more time, my head is going to explode. It really is. That's not working for me. But when I see something online about a great performance that happened at the studio theater, not only do I want to go and give them tickets, I also want to donate again, right? So it's the storytelling that is going to get me to move the needle, and that's me. That may not work for everybody. What is in that email marketing that you're using that's going to make you click? What makes you open up your emails that come to you from organizations that are asking you for support? That wonderful headline, that great grabbing headline will make you open. Sometimes you don't open it at all. So if you have multiple tracks to come to these individual donors, and you can hit them from different tracks, you'll be able to get a great response. But start with yourself and think about what makes you donate to the organizations that you donate. And I'm telling you, those are the same things that your constituents are going to be thinking about as well.
Can I pass it down to Vanessa for a minute? Because just to kind of add to this, the thing that makes me donate, one of the things is that it's a little bit of the, if you tell me a story and I cry at my computer, then I'm probably going to donate. But I also want to know that if I give you some money, you're going to do something good with it, and you're actually going to help improve that situation. And so could you give us a tip or two for organizations that that need to work on the other half of the equation? So they've got the story piece down, but they need a little help articulating what it is that they do and how they're solving the problem. Sort of that, what is my mission and what are my outcomes? Could you give us maybe just like one or two tips, organizations that could go through an exercise that could help them figure that piece out?
Sure. It goes back to the discussions that we had in some of the workshops of the importance of mission clarity and being able to articulate the why behind the things that you do. So what is the why? What is sort of inspires you, and how do you tie that mission to the specific activities that you're engaging in? And I think donors want to understand, to your point, how do you move the needle and how do you demonstrate that you're actually succeeding in achieving the goals that you've set out for the organization. And there I think it is about demonstrating and being able to articulate the specific outcomes that you're committed to, and being able to tell the story as to sort of how you have been able to influence a behavior, influence change in your communities. I think the other scrutiny that I think nonprofits are feeling more and more is sort of what is the paper trail, so to speak. Where are you spending your dollars? How much of it is going directly to your constituents, and how many of your dollars are actually going back into the administration and the running of your nonprofit? And I think that as a core capability moving forward is to be able to demonstrate that transparency. So demonstrate sort of how much of your dollars are going straight back out to the community, and how many of those, where is your dollar exactly being focused in terms of the specific activities and strategies that you're focused on.
Thank you. Any questions from you? Yeah.
A question for Vanessa. She talked earlier about strategic planning and not having it be a one-time or a 5-year. Some general advice on how you change that to integrate it into, to make it a live process, an active process within your organization.
Yeah, there's a couple different strategies. I think it's prioritizing it month to month and maybe setting that time aside with your key stakeholders. I think that pulse checks with the people that you serve and the communities that you serve, and sort of incorporating that feedback into into your work is another way to sort of quote unquote keep you honest, right? That the work that you are actually providing is making a difference. I think that as you evolve your strategic planning capability and as you sort of think about the outcomes and how you're going to measure those, just reporting on those results on a regular basis and just having the conversations about the lessons that you've learned across the last year and where you can improve. So I think that I'm not a huge fan of the phrase strategic planning because it just feels like a big old clumsy process. And I think that to sort of switch the thinking about what information do I need to improve my organization? What information do I need to make sure I can demonstrate that we're actually impacting people in the communities in the way that we want to. So maybe it's a little bit of flipping that conversation and opening that dialogue with your colleagues and with your external stakeholders and providing that channel to have those types of conversations more regularly.
Thank you. One of the things I observed in some of the sessions was that we have a lot of smaller organizations in the room, and so my question to you is, how do you see the role of volunteers playing into each of your different areas, and how can they be a resource to smaller organizations that may not have the staff to be able to do some of these bigger things that we've been talking about?
I can jump in. I mean, there's some, I'll keep it short. I think it depends a little bit on the mission. I mean, I think you can utilize volunteers in a lot of different ways. I think from the diagnostic that we used today and looking at all the different steps that you could take, you certainly can leverage volunteers to help with some of the discrete analyses that would help you inform your approach. You could leverage volunteers. I know there's a lot of undergraduate students who are really eager to support nonprofits and provide pro bono work. Well, harness that interest and harness that capability to help answer the questions about what's going on in your environment, what's happening in your market, what are your peers doing. And a lot of this stuff is the first step is research-based. So don't overlook that. Like, there's a lot of energy and interest, especially among millennials, to get involved and help their communities. And look for those individuals to help build the fact base that would help inform your strategy. So that's just a quick tactical idea.
I would also, especially for the social space, that you call on friends and family members. We often think of the volunteer as somebody out there that we've got to go hunt down. And often there are people who are right around you, who are rallying with you every day and are willing to help out and help you in your space because they believe in the mission. I can't get back enough to the mission and making sure that you're staying on track and you're staying on brand and you're staying on mission. And if all of this is happening, then you're going to find people that are going to support your mission and they're going to work hard for you. Volunteer corps are often difficult to rally when you need them for long stretches of time. So you need a volunteer who really you would rather be an employee, right? So you can only get them for 6 months before you have to pay them health benefits, and you want to work them for those 6 months. But I would also encourage you to look around you to the people who support what you support, do what you want to do what you do, and want to support you in your own personal circles, and then branch out from there. And giving them tasks that are attainable, that you have very clear goals. I mean, often what I found when I worked with AmeriCorps Vista and with our volunteers around the country, when there was a challenge, or I hate to say failure, but when it was not a good working environment or experience for the volunteer, it's because they weren't giving specific tasks and those tasks weren't on mission. So I can't talk about your mission enough, and knowing what your goals are and being able to outline specifically what you want the volunteer to do, and realizing that the volunteers have to be managed, so someone has to be responsible for making sure that they are delivering and that they understand, and that you have checks and balances, you have check-ins with your volunteers, and you have matrix in place to make sure that they're succeeding. And if all of these things come into place, then they can be a very valuable asset to your company, your nonprofit. And we talked about a social media core, being able to get volunteers who are together, but I also recommend that you know your volunteer skill sets, so that you're not going to set them up for failure by putting them in an environment that they don't feel comfortable with. A lot of that happens in the interview process when you're talking to the volunteer about what their interests are and what they believe their strengths are, and then being able to set them up to succeed. The same thing that you would do with an employee, that you want to make sure that you're doing with your volunteers.
And I would say from a fundraising perspective, some of your best donors are going to come from volunteers. Because quite frankly, your board is probably a volunteer board. In addition to that, if you think about it, and I used to work for an organization called Volunteers of America, but we had a whole lot of volunteers across the country. And one of the things I used to talk to our local office about is that, or our local offices about, that they used to separate, well, those are our volunteers versus our donors. And I would say, some of your most committed people to your cause and to the work you do are your volunteers. Some of them have resources that they can give you, significant resources. Others, if they're very involved in their community, can very easily open up doors to other folks to you, okay? They may like to be on committees that you may have other donors on those committees as well. So volunteers are very powerful in fundraising, from smaller gifts or involvement all the way up to they can be some of your more significant donors. So.
Great. Thank you. I think that we're just about out of time. So maybe if I could just kind of close up the Q&A section with a really quick speed answer section. So 10 words or less. I hate to end it on kind of negative, but can you give us a please don't do? Like just a, if there's one thing that you just recommend folks, please don't do, what would they be?
I have to answer that one first. Well, please don't do. I would say, please don't, whether it's however you communicate with them, please don't neglect your supporters and your donors. Okay? Communicate with them, educate with them, build a relationship over time.
Please don't do anything in the social space that you would not want to appear on the front page of the New York Times or have your grandmother read.
And I would say, please don't do strategic planning in a box, in a vacuum. Engage your stakeholders, engage your board, engage your people that you serve, engage your partners and your peers. And there's a wealth of public information out there that you can leverage to help you form thinking about where you want to take your organization. So don't do it in a box.
Great, thank you. So thank you to Vanessa, Danielle, and Ron for their time and expertise today. I just thank you.